Hello and welcome to the video. Today we are doing another rally test on small island USA using mixed stage 1 if you want to give it a try yourself. We are using rally cars this time, which makes a lot more sense on the rally stage really. Last time we tried all of the off-road vehicles that came with the latest update and saw how they did, but now it's time to try the rally cars that are in the game. There's a huge variety, so it's really quite fun to give them a try and see how they hold up, how they compare to each other, but also how they compare to the off-road vehicles that we ran last time. Quite a few of the off-road vehicles from last time did rather well. We're starting with the LeGran, which is quite a sensible car. It's quite heavy, because it's like a bit of an American boat in that sense, but it's all-wheel drive and it has a little bit of power, not too much actually, but it makes it really easy to handle. So the kind of mistakes that I made were much like this really, kind of just pushing because you're comfortable with using it. It has quite a lot of control, so it feels quite safe to sort of push it as far as you can get it to go. The Piccolina is a very different story. In this corner especially, you come in with a lot of speed and you have to slow it down. But I think it's quite a dusty corner, I think I've noticed that. But yeah, any car is quite liable to sliding out there, but especially Piccolina is, yeah, not a good choice there, honestly. So it's a bit more survival and just being a little bit more careful just to make it to the end, hopefully fast. But yeah, setting the fastest time for me, it really became a bit more of a slightly more careful approach. Even though we did still quite push it a fair bit. There through the corner you end up in the ditch a little bit, but actually that slows you down. And if you don't spin out, then that's quite fine. It's one way of braking, I guess. But yeah, it's quite fun to try how fast you can get it to go, because it's just a little bit dangerous. It spins out really easily. You have to be quite careful and sort of learn how to deal with that. It sets a slower time than the LeGran, which is, I mean, not a surprise to me. You have to be careful with it, and it's not even the most powerful thing in existence. Next up is the I-Series, and that is such a nice car to drive. It is four-wheel drive, it's amazing control, and yet it has a lot of power as well. So I am always happy to try and drive that one around. Unfortunately, as you saw in the failed clips, I did end a few of my runs in exactly the same place by crashing on one of the last corners, really. Because I will have set a pretty good time. I would be quite excited to finish that round, and then I just cut it a little bit too short, and there's a few corners that you really shouldn't cut, so you have to be rather careful with that. This car does really quite well, both on tarmac and on dirt. Has no problems through the hay bales. It can put its power down nicely on this little straight. This time I have learned to take a little bit more distance and not cut there, and then all we need to do is round out the last corner without falling into that ditch and making it to the finish line. I much prefer driving this kind of car over these rear-wheel drive twitchy messes of a car. Would you look at that? There's an example. This is the Bolide, which is, I mean, a beautiful looking car, I think. But I have never in any game been very good at handling one of those. Because like you land, you do nothing. I on purpose wasn't braking, I on purpose wasn't steering when landing, just so it would have control, like land, get control back, and then get going. But still it spins out. It's rather unpredictable, I would say. So that makes it quite hard to drive. I still had quite a lot of fun just trying to get to know the car and trying to get a good time. But I think there are people that are capable of sort of running this kind of car and actually pushing it. For me, I want to push it but be on the safe side, like early braking in this corner, for example, is quite important because it's very easy to slide out in that corner, like you just saw in the fails as well. But on getting onto the gravel here, for example, in the acceleration, I'm not full throttle and still it's accelerating really fast. I spent a little bit more time on this one than the others really, because it also was partly just me learning to drive this car and I wanted to give them all a fair chance. But it's entirely possible that other people would be faster with this car. I get a 51.710, which is as much as I'm going to get out of that one really. This is a car that I much prefer when it comes to just being able to handle it. This little Covet, I mean, you can definitely make mistakes, but again, this is the kind of mistakes that you make if you're too confident with the car. it's front wheel drive. So if you are too much on the throttle, you just don't spin out. No, you just keep going forwards, which is fine because then you can just let go of the throttle, you can brake, you can always solve the situation sort of. So this is a car I feel much more confident in, and that means that I can push it a lot more as well. It has considerably less power than Bolide from before, but I think it makes up for that in just having so much control. Here, for example, on the long straight, I'm gonna be careful into this corner, but on the long straight I can just use all the power without being too scared it's gonna mess up. It still has a quite short wheelbase, so it's quite a short car. That makes it still a little bit sketchier, but it's really nothing compared to the Bolide. So I enjoy riding this kind of car around, and set a pretty good time. However, it's not faster than the Bolide, which surprised me, just because I felt like I could be a lot faster in that one. And the Covet rear-wheel drive, there's another version that's more recent than the one that we just had, front-wheel drive one. And I kind of, honestly, I kind of hate that this version exists, because it meant that I kind of had to run it in this test. I mean, I have to do anything, but still, I felt like it would be only fair to also run the rear-wheel drive car version. And it is better than the Bolide when it comes to control. Like you saw just now, I was a little bit more confident in just sending it over that hill. And it went wrong because this is a fail clip, but it did actually go okay sometimes. I'm more confident in this one, even though it is also a very short wheelbase and a lot of power in the rear wheels. The main difference here is that if it starts sliding, you can still save it. With the Bolide, that's just not really possible. As soon as you start sliding, you just start sliding and that's it. That's the end of your run. And this one, I think, is just better in that regard. It starts sliding quite easily as well though, so you do have to be careful, which I had to be here, for example in third gear on this little bit of dirt, just so that you have control as you're accelerating, rather than that you put it down all the power but you go left, right, and lose time anyway. So yeah, no, I think this wasn't the worst car to drive, but it wasn't easy either. You see here on the uphill that I did try to give it everything. And actually it's basically the same time as the Bolide, and they're both, the Bolide and the rear wheel drive, are faster than the front wheel drive Covet, so I was a little bit surprised. Now this car is kind of very different from what we were just driving. It's an off-road version of the H series, I think the van is called. Yeah, this is really just heavy. That's all there is to it. It actually has plenty of power. It has rear all-wheel drive, I mean, and it's easy to control. Like just going through those hay bales, despite being so heavy, it just has lots of grip. It's quite nice to drive. It's technically one of the off-road vehicles, though, not a rally vehicle. But yeah, I kind of enjoyed this run. I kind of enjoy these cars that you can push. You shouldn't push though when it comes to high-speed corners and how late you're braking, because it is really heavy. That's the only downside, I would say. Otherwise, pretty nice. The time that it sets is a 52.802, which is surprising. That's really fast for such a big van that's kind of off-road focused. So yeah, I'm quite surprised by that. I quite enjoyed driving it as well. And I think that's going to be interesting to compare also to the off-road vehicles, to see how that one fits in. Now it's time for my favorite rally car of them all. You saw in the failed clips that there is quite a few things that can go wrong with that car, but it's very much, again, a question of pushing it too far, being too confident, being too happy to drive it, really. Because compared to all of these twitchy, horrible to drive vehicles, or some that didn't have great suspension or were a little bit heavy, this one is just so nice. It has suspension that keeps in contact with the ground all the time. It's just so fast and so nice. It has plenty of power. Couldn't ask for anything more, really. Still a few sketchy moments because I did want to set the best time possible. Last time I did run one also in the off-road test, just to compare sort of the off-road vehicles with an actual rally car. But then I took like 5 minutes to set a time that was better than all of the off-road vehicles, so I thought, yeah, I don't need to try to set any better time. But this time, since we're focusing on the rally cars, I did want to see what I could get out of that. And I mean, unsurprisingly, it is the absolute best time of the day, in the 46 seconds range, actually. So that's, yeah, pretty nice. And rather different from what we're looking at right now, this Pigeon, or Wigeon I think this is, every time you try to put down power, it just doesn't go straight. So every time that you think, oh, I'm finally going to be able to put down some power, you just are sorely mistaken. But it's so fun to try anyway. I was speaking of these cars with short wheelbases and rear-wheel drive. Well, this is sort of the pinnacle of that. I actually don't think that that is the biggest problem that it has, because it's doing actually quite well because it doesn't have too much power to put down through those rear wheels. That's actually in its favor, honestly. It shouldn't have more power than it does. And yeah, it's actually quite nice to drive if you don't have to push it. But that's very much the point of this this experiment, is to see how much we can get out of it. So yeah, here for example, on this slight uphill with on gravel, dirt, it just, you can't put power down. It just starts sliding left and right. You have to be careful. But yeah, the best time that I could get out of it is this one. It's a bit of a weird mix of trying to push it as much as you can, but just nothing coming out, really. A little bit disappointing. But what did we expect, really? That's a 58. Next up is something that's not at all disappointing, because the Bastion is, yeah, I mean, it's a muscle car in essence, but it's been given four-wheel drive and off-road suspension setup, which for a muscle car, if you try to make it off-road, you don't actually get to something that's suitable for off-road. It actually feels like it's more of a rally car. And yeah, that's what we're doing right now. So it actually handles really well. It's so nice to drive, and it has plenty of power. At least the engine sounds make it seem like it has enough power. It's not going to be the fastest, because it's still, in essence, really not made for this. I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried riding a muscle car on gravel and dirt and on a rally stage. It's not something I recommend, but very fun to give a try. And it sets a 50.56, which is pretty decent. Now, as the last car to run, I thought I'd throw in a little bit of an oddball, because this car, the 800 series I think it's called, is one that doesn't have a rally version. It is a station wagon, so I think it makes sense for it not to have a rally version. But that's why I kind of just chose the best version that's there, that is just a sports car. I think that was most suitable to the track, and it does really well. This rally stage thankfully consists of quite a bit of tarmac, but still that is bumpy tarmac and it goes up and down, so you do have to have some control. It is all-wheel drive, and it doesn't have the right tires for dirt, but it does surprisingly well, and it is so fast. I mean, it is set up for streets, so it does put down a lot of power on the parts where it is on tarmac. So surprisingly, this one actually beats every single rally car we've run, except for the favorite Vivace, of course. But isn't that insane? So I think that it would be very interesting to try different normal cars and then take like the sports version or something and see how well they do. That might be an idea for the next video. Let me know if you'd like to see that. So yeah, onto the leaderboards. The first two we talked about already, and they are quite far ahead of the third and fourth place. They are close together. The Bastion and the I-Series are pretty close together. And it's predictable, they are good cars, they have good control, four-wheel drive and everything. But what surprised me is that the LeGran is actually very close behind, just a second off. But it's ahead, just ahead, of both the Bolide and the Covet front-wheel drive. Those times are all really, really close together, but what surprises me most is that that big heavy LeGran is just ahead of all of the other smaller cars with much better power-to-weight ratios. I have to say that the Bolide and the rear-wheel drive Covet are so close together that it's not quite convincing enough for me to say that one is better than the other. It could have just as easily been a small mistake on my end, and like, this is not a perfect test. I just took each car and did a good run with it, like one that felt really good, but that's nowhere near enough of an exact science to decide which one of those is better. What else is surprising to me is that the Piccolina and the van did pretty much equally well, which is kind of insane considering how different they are in every respect. And yeah, let's not talk about the Mantis, the Wigeon that we ran last. If we want to compare it to the off-road vehicles that we ran last time though, it's quite interesting to see that the Scintilla places into third if we were to combine it into a leaderboard of today, which makes sense. The first two cars that we ran today were just really, really fast, and the Bastion is actually quite similar to the Scintilla, because they are both not supposed to be on dirt tracks, but they've been both swapped into off-road vehicles that are all-wheel drive and have plenty of power. So in a way they're quite similar, and the Scintilla is of course going to be a little bit lighter and a little bit more power probably, but they were both easy to control. It's interesting to see that the stadium truck, the Rock Basher, and the Piccolina off-road, like the buggy version, all slide into 4th place, like between 4th and 5th, which is quite interesting to see that most rally cars don't actually beat them on a rally stage. I think that is a little bit shocking, to be entirely honest, but I think that's really, really cool. The trophy truck finds itself squeezed in between the two Covets, which is also an interesting mix-up, how the rear-wheel drive Covet and the front-wheel drive Covet are just a little bit faster and just a little bit slower than the trophy truck. The rest, though, the Hopper, the Stambeco, the Ambulance, and the Hydra, they are all slower than the van, which is a little bit surprising. I mean, not most of those are surprising, but the fact that the Hopper is slower than the van is a little bit surprising. I would have expected that one to be a little bit faster. There are still plenty of rally cars that I haven't run yet, and there are many more road cars that I would love to try, and some of them might even be faster than most of the rally cars. So if you would like to see that, let me know. But that's it for today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye!